Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. And in today's video, I will be discussing the state of Texas, how it could flip, and the significance of it flipping. Now this state's been a pretty solid Republican state, at least for throughout history. Last time a Democrat won here was 1976. Obviously a very different political environment. Actually very strange. You can see the East was not, I don't want to say solid Democrat, but it was pretty liberal. Most of the eastern states voted blue. Most of the western states voted red. I just find this kind of strange. I'm not analyzing the 2000 or 19 not 2000 the 1976 election. Florida went red. Or California went red. Very different political climate. Anyways, I feel like the early 90s are a better representation, or the 90s are a better representation of America's political climate right now if we're looking this far back. Still not necessarily like great representation. Missouri was so close, and Bill Clinton carried Arkansas. But anyways, as we get closer and closer, I think that the best representation, at least for the state of Texas, was 2012 because George W. Bush, this was like his home state. He did pretty well there. 2008 was a Democratic wave year, so it's going to be closer. George W. Bush, like I said, his home state, and then Bill Clinton did really well. And before this, things are basically irrelevant. But Mitt Romney won here by 15.8%. Hillary Clinton narrowed that margin by 6.8%, and Joe Biden narrowed it by 3.5%. So it's been trending to the left recently. But also, if you look at this, I have a spreadsheet that I made. I'm working on this right now. But if you look at this, I was looking at turnout and how groups voted in the electorate as opposed to their population. Texas, the white voters have a disproportionately large share of the electorate. They have 60% when they only have 41% of the population. Hispanic and Latino voters have 9% or have 9% less of a share in the electorate than they do of the population. Black voters have the same in both. And both Asian and other voters are both also lower. But I did math earlier and I took a look at this. And I did all the math, and if you add up all the things, all the numbers, it's 50.16, which is obviously a win for the Democrats. However, there is one thing we do need to look at, and that is if Democrats can do as well among the Latino and Hispanic vote in Texas as they did nationally. Now, the Latino and Hispanic vote in Texas was the tightest group, except for maybe other racial/ethnic groups. But this was one of the tightest racial groups. It was only a 17% victory for Democrats, and they should be winning. They should be getting at least 2/3 of the Latino and Hispanic vote, not only 58%. But if you look at Beto O'Rourke's numbers when he came very close to victory in 2018, he won 64% of the Latino vote, and then Joe Biden won 65. Democrats should be doing better among on the Latino and Hispanic vote than they are. I think that they can win this vote back. I think that they can do better. Also, this state is growing in population, and while they still they're technically winning the Latino and Hispanic vote, and in 4 years' time, the state's population will have grown more, and the Latino and Hispanic vote will have gotten a larger share of the electorate. And it doesn't matter if how much you're winning it by. If you're winning it, you're still winning the majority of the votes. And even if you're not winning it by a lot, this group getting larger, even if you're winning it by 1%, that's still a net gain for you. So Democrats, I think, could flip Texas. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll become increasingly competitive. But if they can do better among that Latino and Hispanic vote, especially if they run a candidate who can appeal to those voters, I think that Texas could flip blue. It's a legitimate possibility that Texas does flip because, like I said, if Democrats are able to raise turnout so that every group gets every group is proportionally represented in the electorate, and then they also do just as well among the Latino and Hispanic vote on in Texas as they do on the statewide or the national level, which we've seen them do. Beto O'Rourke was able to do it in 2018. This is a lot of this Latino and Hispanic revolt against the Democrats. It's only really been happening this year, and I think that Democrats, I think that they can win back the Latino and Hispanic vote in Texas at least. Florida might be another story, but in Texas, I think that they most most definitely can. Another option for them is to do better among the white vote. I don't think that white voters are the best path for the Democratic Party right now. They don't do that well among white voters. In Texas, they only won 33% of the white vote. They actually did better. Oh, yeah, okay, the divorce. I thought, or at least in Georgia. I've been looking at all of those exit polls recently. But Joe Biden on a national level did pretty well among the white voters. I don't think that this is necessarily Democrats' path into the future. Joe Biden did surprisingly well among white voters for Democrats, or I don't want to say necessarily did better, but appealed to a lot of white voters more. Also, he was more moderate, so that could have helped. But I think that at this point, white voters, their share, I don't want to say their share of the electorate, their share of the population is going down. And if minorities continue to become the majority, and I've said before, it doesn't, like, white voters will still have the largest share of the population of any group. It's just when you combine every minority group, they'll hold the majority as opposed to whites. But white voters have at least in Texas, a larger share of the vote. But they're also, I think that they could do well among white voters, but I don't think that they will. I don't think that's the path forward. And as white voters continue to get a smaller and smaller share of the electorate, I think that will definitely favor Democrats. I think that right now, whichever group white voters typically win over, or whichever party typically wins over white voters, um, if they can't carry any other minority groups, because the only group that they're close to carrying, and they're carrying it in some states, is this other racial / ethnic groups. They're actually carrying it in Texas. Democrats won it in Georgia, so it really depends on the state. But Republicans right now, as white voters get a smaller and smaller share of the electorate, can't only rely on these white voters. I think that Democrats, if they have enough support from the white voters, and as I think they have enough support from the white voters right now to be able to do well here, and they have enough support to the point where they can still do well with the support that they have plus their minority support. But as white voters get a smaller and smaller share of the electorate, I don't think it's very wise for Democrats to be focusing all of their efforts on gaining white voters. I think it would be much smarter for them to put all their efforts into raising turnout. We've seen what happened when they tried to raise turnout when they raised turnout in Georgia. I think that it's easier at this point to raise turnout than it is to flip voters. Swing voters are they're not necessarily difficult to win over. Well, I mean, like, in the climate of America right now, swing voters, I would assume, would vote whoever they align most closely with, and obviously if they're swinging from Democrat to Republican, they're probably going to be relatively moderate. So these voters are probably going to typically stay with the more moderate voters. However, when it comes to raising turnout, I think that having at least a candidate that's less moderate would help them, because candidates that are both farther to the left and to the right, I feel like to the right that would help them. I feel like to the right would help a lot with white voters, while to the left would help with not only minorities and white voters, or would help with minorities, probably white voters. I would assume younger white voters, but white voters nonetheless. Because the thing is, for whatever reason, or actually, if you think about it, these more centrist candidates are typically, like, pretty boring. Like, I don't mean, like, to be mean to centrist candidates, but they're not really enthusiastic. Like, it's not, they can be enthusiastic. They're enthusiastic, but they don't have that type of, like, buzz around them. Like, Amy Klobuchar, for example, is enthusiastic, but she doesn't have. You might go, oh, okay, let's go to an Amy Klobuchar rally, but you're not going to be like as excited to go to an Amy Klobuchar rally as you would be to go to a Trump rally if you support Trump, or to a Bernie rally if you support Bernie. I would assume that it's because as these voters are candidates, both on the left and to the right, as they are farther to both party, are deemed radical. If you're radical, you want radical change, and a lot of this radical change gets people hyped up, and it's going to make people want to vote. I think people weren't hyped up this election to vote for Joe Biden. They're hyped up to vote against Donald Trump. That's the thing. If Joe Biden were to run again, if he were to run against a moderate Republican, he probably would have lost. But if he were to run against a candidate that's a traditional Republican, that's not very exciting, turnout would not have been nearly as high as it was. But if Bernie were to win, I don't necessarily know that he would win, but he would raise turnout all over the U.S. because voters are more enthusiastic to vote for people like Bernie. And I think that if Democrats are able to run the right candidates that are able to raise turnout yet still appeal to a lot of these voters that rejected the Democratic Party in 2020, they can flip the state of Texas. But now on to why this would be so significant. Democrats, if they flip Texas, first off, this state, like I said, it's been a solid Democratic state, or solid Republican state for ages. It hasn't voted blue in, I'm not going to do the math right now, but it hasn't voted blue in a very long time. But even if this does vote red, Republicans can win. They can win the Rust Belt. They can win Georgia. They can win Arizona, and they still lose. It's incredible. If Democrats were to carry Arizona, they could even carry Minnesota. They could carry Nebraska second. Even if they were to carry New Hampshire, it would be a tie. It's incredible what Democrats can do, especially if they're able to carry Texas. I don't know why I characterized Florida. Maybe it was an accident, but Democrats will have almost a certain victory every election, because I think Georgia is definitely shifting to the left. This will probably be a lean Democratic state in 2024, maybe tilt, but it's probably going to be a Democratic state in 2024. Wisconsin, even if it votes red, which I think it probably will, then it will be a Republican or Democrats still win. Pennsylvania, if it were to vote Republican, Democrats would still win. I would be kind of surprised if Pennsylvania were to vote Republican, but not entirely surprised. Michigan could vote with the Republicans, and Democrats could still win. You see what I mean? There are a number of states that Republicans would have to win to win. And while I don't necessarily think that it's unrealistic that Republicans carry, say, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia and Pennsylvania or something. I don't see them doing something where they can, like, they still lose with all this. I don't see them being able to carry enough states. I don't think that this would happen, or at least assuming that Texas votes blue. I don't think that this would happen. I think that they could flip a number of these states. I think that Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, I think that they could all flip. I think there's a good chance that a lot of them flip. I don't think that every single one of them is going to flip, all at once at least. Republicans would have to do incredibly well. I think that this is pretty likely. I think that this is pretty likely. I think that this is even relatively likely. Like, these are all states, like, Trump couldn't even win Nevada in 2016. I don't see other Republicans, or maybe more moderate, traditional Republicans flipping Nevada. Like, Nikki Haley might be able to. If he were to somehow win the nomination, John Kasich could maybe. But I don't really see it happening. At this point, if Democrats were to be able to flip Texas, it's game over for Republicans. I don't see a path to victory for them that would actually happen. They would have to win literally almost every swing state. Like, almost every swing state. The only states that Democrats would have to win other than Texas, Minnesota, and New Hampshire. That's it. Well, and Florida for Republicans, I guess. That was already a swing state. But at this point, I think that Texas can flip blue, and if it does, if it stays blue, Republicans won't win. For a long time, there's gonna have to be a big shift in America's electorate if Texas stays blue, and if it flips blue and stays blue, and Republicans won't be able to win. I don't, like I said, I don't think that Texas will flip blue, but looking at all that data, looking at all those numbers, if Democrats can do it, if they can go back to the numbers that they had with Beto O'Rourke, and if they can go back to numbers that they've had before 2020, anything that they were able to do with Hispanic and Latino voters in the state of Florida, in the state of Texas before the 2020 election, they can do that again, and then they can give those voters, if they can raise turnout enough, so that those voters have a share of the electorate that actually represents their share of the population. Democrats would, I would assume, flip the state of Texas. I don't think we should bet on it, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Stay tuned for my next video. I have no idea what I'm going to upload tomorrow. Hopefully it'll be something good. But yeah, I will see you guys there. Bye!